Attention! If you have not played Danganronpa 1 and 2 and you want to keep all the surprises those games have to offer intact, avoid all content related to this game. This includes reviews and promotional material. This game will, by default, spoil some big plot points of both of those games. Now, if you haven't turned the video off yet, you've all been warned, so let's get into it. Not counting the 2012 game Monokuma Strikes Back for iOS and Android, Ultra Despair Girls is the third game released in the Danganronpa series and works both as a spin-off and a canonical entry in the game's lore. Releasing first on Vita in 2014 and eventually making its way to the PlayStation 4 and PC in 2017, we are playing the Vita version today, the version I've had since the game launched in North America in 2015 and haven't played until now. See, I knew when this game came out that I would be buying it, because I loved the Danganronpa universe, but I also knew this was a third-person shooter, and because of that I kept finding reasons to delay playing it until now. If you were to try and reimagine Danganronpa in a different genre, chances are you wouldn't settle on it being a third-person shooter. Yet somebody somewhere did, and the question remains now, how did it turn out? Let's start by talking about the part that's easiest to carry over, the story. The game starts with our main character, Komaru Naegi, alone in her apartment building. If the name sounds familiar to you at all, you may remember her as Makoto's sister from Danganronpa 1. As you'll recall, Makoto's family was kidnapped to give him motivation to commit murder. Now we see what happened to his kidnapped family. At least, we see what happened to his sister. The parents and their location is unknown. This game takes place 6 months after Danganronpa 1 and a short while before Danganronpa 2. As it is, Komaru has been living here alone, against her will for quite some time. Yet, on this day, salvation comes. But not in the way she had hoped. Ravenous Monokumas tear into the apartment that has been serving as her cell, and they force her to run for her life. After a brief tussle, she is saved by the Future Foundation and Byakuya Togami. While she's being escorted to safety, she sees Towa City is not at all as she remembered it. Now it stands in a state of utter disarray and chaos, littered with bodies everywhere she looks. But she's not out long enough to discover much else, as she is soon recaptured. This time, Komaru is captured by the group of children responsible for the current state of Towa City. She discovers the motive for their chaos as well, to create a utopia for the children. To create this utopia, all adults must be eradicated. From here on out, Komaru joins forces with Toko Fukawa and escapes into the city, desperate to find a way to escape the city or end the war the children have on the adults. This is by far the darkest of the Danganronpa games, and the sense of comedy often doesn't do much to offer breathing space or lighten the atmosphere. No, it's pretty hard to laugh at very much here. When everywhere you go, the streets are littered with tortured and murdered corpses, and dark and demented stories from the children and their parents in their final days can be found around every corner. This doesn't mean there isn't comedy to be found, but the offbeat comedy I've come to know and love from the first two entries really doesn't shine its brightest. This is largely because our mascot character Monokuma, the general source of comedic relief, is now nothing more than a mindless killing machine in this entry. Other Kumas pop up to fill the gap a bit, but while I liked Shirakuma as a kind of Monomi-like character, Kurokuma managed to annoy the piss out of me. Thankfully, Kurokuma's screen time is very limited. While a big part of the Danganronpa experience has been the setting and atmosphere, one of the other biggest parts has always been the characters. And among all the entries, this one probably has the weakest cast, though this is largely due to the plot not being centralized on as large a group of people. We have Komaru and Toko as previously mentioned. They are our main characters, and both have great chemistry together and help each other grow as characters throughout the adventure. Really, their writing is great, and they fill up about 90% of the screen time and really carry the game. So where I may criticize other characters, know that I find Komaru and Toko to be something of a redeeming aspect for the writing of the cast. Aside from the two Kumas I've already covered, we have the group of children who are responsible for the state of the city, occupying big chunks of the narrative. The children each get a fair bit of detail, and you get to learn a lot about them. And honestly, their history can make them quite sympathetic characters, but it's hard to fully enjoy any of them. I feel for the most part I liked what they added to the adventure, but my feelings towards them were never consistent, save for one kid, who I just could not stand. To be fair to him though, it wasn't his writing that made me like him less, but his personality as conveyed by the voice actor. It's just part of his character to be slow and drab and boring. And it is truly slow and drab and boring to me. Often by the time I reached the end of a sentence, I'd be forgetting what the beginning was as it happened so long ago.
Did you think you could escape if you went somewhere real high up? But no matter where you run, it's pointless. Remember, Elf?
Other characters pop up here and there, but their roles aren't nearly as large. These characters don't require much of a statement, aside from saying Nagito, whom I've always loved, isn't as terrible with his overuse of the words hope and despair this time around, and I'm very happy to see it. Obviously, I can't get into it for spoiler reasons, but the game builds up to a pretty over-the-top ending, with twists stacked upon twists, upon twists, upon twists, upon twists, until you just don't know what's going on anymore. It's kinda awesome. The way the closing scenes are presented, it's not the easiest to understand everything they're showing you, but with a bit of thought, it comes together and leaves a strong impression. At times, I found it was a bit fast and loose with the already established canon, but where I got pretty lost in all the info I was presented with, I can't say with certainty that any canon was really destroyed in the process of this game. So congrats on pulling that off, or at the very least, getting it past me. Overall, the game is roughly 20 to 25 hours, about 65% gameplay, 35% visual novel content. Visual novel segments, while not overly long most of the time, do interrupt gameplay a bit more frequently than I would like for a game of this type. But maybe it's time to actually talk about the gameplay. So you can see so far the game is radically different than previous ones. You have a city to explore, there's no class trials, you're not really in the same kind of killing game, yet many of the motifs and characters have returned. So let's look at how the adventure actually plays out now, and what you'll be doing along the way. As I said earlier, this game is a third-person shooter. Shortly after Komaru is sprung from her cell, she is presented with a megaphone of sorts. This works as our main weapon against the Monokumas that roam the streets. There are no other guns in the game, but the megaphone has different types of ammo that will unlock gradually as you play. These ammo types include Break, your standard type of ammo, Paralysis, an electric shock that spreads in water, Knockback, a spread shot that sends enemies flying, Link, a shot that allows you to temporarily take control of enemy Monokumas, Detect, which allows you to see hidden messages and items, as well as a couple others. The move type of ammo is unique to the rest, as its capabilities exist more in exploration than in combat. It works like an interact button, and is the only ammo that's infinite in supply. It can't hurt enemies directly, but can be used to lure them into situations that will lead them to their demise. Just like different types of ammo have different properties, you will come across different types of Monokumas with different weaknesses and behavior patterns. More than running around just firing on enemies like a typical third-person shooter, you will be trying to find ways to conserve ammo while targeting enemy weaknesses and luring them into traps, allowing you to kill as many of them at once as possible. The game's combat is often more driven by strategy and puzzles than simply firing until dead. As such, it does a decent job of bridging the gap between third-person shooters and the original Danganronpa series, and makes it more comfortable for old fans to jump in. The best examples of this exist in the Twin Peaks-inspired Red Room puzzles, where you're rewarded for finishing off enemies in certain ways, using a certain amount of shots, and only a certain type of ammo. These were more or less the highlight of the gameplay for me. The typical third-person shooter rules still apply here, but with slight variations. The camera is a bit over the shoulder, and your aim-down sights will center you better, but concepts like headshots are reworked to eye shots, and let me tell you, this definitely makes me miss headshots. Getting the eye shots is much harder than getting headshots in the first and third-person shooters that I'm used to, but given you're rewarded for landing the shot, it makes sense for it to be a tad tough. Hitting a Monokuma in the eye with your standard ammo type will give you a powered up shot the next time you fire, and this shot is strong enough to kill most enemies in one hit, regardless of where your shot lands. You should also only fire with careful aim, as ammo is quite limited in this game. To help you out along the way, you can level up your character and equip special abilities found by salvaging items found throughout the game. You can also equip 2 upgrades to every type of ammo. Ammo upgrades can be purchased at sidewalk vendors throughout the game, game, as well as upgrades for Toko, who you can switch to mid-combat so long as her battery meter has some charge left in it. Toko works with more hack and slash mechanics. Though relatively basic with her use of simple attacks, charge attacks, and specials, she can really help you out in a pinch and turn most enemies into Swiss cheese with no regard towards their individual weaknesses. Toko will also come to your aid just before you hit game over, where your ability to continue is determined by a quick time event. Overall, the gameplay is pretty decent. It's at the very least way better than I worried it would be, though I take some issues with some of the controls and performance on Vita. For starters, the camera rotation is really slow, and it can't be adjusted. This makes aiming a tad harder than I would like on Vita, and general exploration becomes a little frustrating as a result. Some things control-wise generally just feel a bit clunky. While the game often runs well, it's obvious the Vita has limitations. You'll see this in frame pacing issues during cutscenes, as well as some slowdown in combat. The game's interface for visual novel segments is clean and stylish, and honestly I think it's damn near perfect for this game and series, though the menus maybe could use some work and be a little cleaner. The music makes a strong return, with remixed versions of old tunes as well as many new ones. The only tune that I really didn't like was the one that plays on the main menu. Go ninja, go ninja, go. Go ninja, go ninja, go. I thought the overall art style and animation was good, with one notable exception: the lip flaps. I'm not sure if the team in charge of lip sync were Midokins from Oddworld or not, but they seem to have little to no regard for what natural lip flaps actually look like. And the last two issues I had: 1. There's only English voice acting. While the voice acting is actually really darn good, it just struck me as odd that the dual audio options were removed 3 entries into the series. And 2. Animated cutscenes have no option for subtitles whatsoever. There were times where I'd be playing in quiet environments, not wanting to disturb the people around me. All of a sudden I find myself in a cutscene, and I simply can't play at low volumes anymore. This seems like a really dumb oversight to me. Really, nothing in this entry made or broke the experience for me. It was a neat take on the Danganronpa series and an interesting way to fill in some of the world's lore, but it's a game I could personally take or leave. I feel it's worth the time to play to get more into the universe, but the Vita version is the one I would recommend the least. If you have access to a PS4 or PC, I'd say to play it there. Really, the only thing that dragged down the experience the most was a bit of roughness around the edges and some performance issues. But I can see playing with a higher frame rate and a better control system cleaning this game up a lot. And that's all I'm gonna say on Ultra Despair Girls. It's weird, it's fun, it's interesting. If you guys like the video, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you can. Consider supporting the Patreon, links to socials are in the description. As always, folks, thanks for watching.